Hi, I'm Dominic Cronin, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a console application in Visual Studio in C# with dependency injection. Let's get started by going to Visual Studio. I'm opening up Visual Studio 2022, the latest version, and I'm going to create a new project. And what you can see here is immediately interesting. You've got various kinds of templates that are available that will produce the scaffolding for the different kinds of applications. And so, for example, if you were to choose ASP.NET Core Web App, it would create an ASP.NET Core Web App with all the dependency injection wired up and ready to go. Unfortunately, if you create a console app, that's not the case. So let's just create one, and you can see I'm using .NET 6 and with top-level statements. You could also do this without top-level statements. But that actually does allow us to see the very bare-bones nature of the console app. So I can run this, and it doesn't do anything much except output hello world to the console. Hurrah! Okay, so yeah, why do I want to add dependency injection? Well, what I find is that I use console apps mostly if I want to test out a bit of code or try out a new idea or something, and sometimes you can find you've gone quite a long way along the road before you realize, yeah, okay, now this is something that I want to do, and I want to transfer this code into real application. Maybe you've written a class that's useful, and so it's handy if you've written the class from the beginning with the assumption of dependency injection, so that you're not creating the dependencies in the class but injecting them from outside, and you're sticking to the disciplines that you want to stick to normally when writing code. It allows you to add unit tests, whatever the rest. The good news is it's actually really easy to do. So let's have at it. So let's imagine that in my application I've decided I want to have the main functionality of the application be hosted in a class called application. So I'm going to create a services folder. Not necessary, but this is the convention. This is where we typically put service classes. And I'm going to add a class. And yeah, for this demo, that's going to be called application. And then what's the minimum I can do? Public void run. So I'm going to make a run method, and the run method, I'm going to just pick up this console line. In the run method, I'm going to add a console write line, and here I'm going to say from application class, from the application class. Okay, so this is the line of code that I actually want to have executed. This will show me that I've managed to get this application class up in the air via dependency injection, and then execute some code in it. So I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to add an interface. It's not strictly necessary. You can do this without an interface, but the standard convention is we work with interfaces. So I'm going to let it create the default application. I'm going to say add it to the current file. So now I have an interface and I have an application class. So let's go back to the program file. So I'm just going to leave that console line there. And then there's two things that I need to add in the the dependencies of the application itself. So let's go to NuGet, manage NuGet packages, and of course there's various ways of adding NuGet packages, but we'll just go here because it's how I usually do it. And I'm going to say, let's have a look and see what packages I need to add. The packages that are interesting for this are in the Microsoft.extensions namespace. Okay, and the first one we want is this one, Microsoft.extensions.dependency injection. So not any other variations on a theme, this is the one we want, Microsoft.extensions.dependency injection. That should be easy enough to remember. And the other one we want is also in a Microsoft extensions namespace, and it's called Microsoft extensions.hosting. Again, there are various variations on a theme here, but this is the one we want, Microsoft.extensions.hosting. Install that one too. And now we've got everything that we need. So having added that, we now have access to a class called host. And unfortunately, Visual Studio is very clever, and it will add the namespace for me if I let it. Yeah, there we are. See, it's added the namespace here. And what I want to do is I want to get a host. So it implements the iHost interface. And I'm going to say, host dot create default builder. And this is a very interesting method. This will set up the default host builder in a .NET 6 application, and if I hover over it, you can see that it does a whole bunch of really interesting things. It's going to set us up with pulling in configuration from various sources, from an app settings file or from the environment variables or whatever. Very useful. And it's also going to set up the iLogger factory, and I'm going to use that later in the demo. Okay, so what I'm going to do now that I have a builder, I'm going to say configure services. Okay, and it immediately offers to create a Lambda for me, which is nice. And let's just make a function of it. I'm going to finish that off. And then once you've done the configuring of services, you need to call .build. Or you might chain various other methods in here, but for now you call .build. And that gives us then an iHost back. So let's have a look what we actually want to do in the services method, or in the configure services lambda. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say services dot add singleton, and what I want to do is say iApplication and application. I hope it doesn't try and fill in too much bad text for me. Yeah, it wants to do that. It will pull in the namespace for me in a second. All right. Sometimes it does it by magic, and other times you've got to do that. Still, whichever way, it's still easier than typing all that stuff. So where are we here? So I now have a host which is created by the default builder, and the host is now set up with configured services, or one configured service. What that means is that the dependency injection container has the information available to it, so that when I ask it for an iApplication, it will know to instantiate an application, an item of this type, and it'll be a singleton. So the dependency injection also manages the scope of the items it provides you. So all very well, I've got a dependency injection container that knows how to do that, but I still need to call that method, so I still need the object. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, let's make a variable for the application. I'm just going to use var, why not, equals underscore host. So I'm going to the host, I'm going to services on the host. This is how I get access to the dependency injection container. And then I'm going to, oh look, it's done most of the work for me. I'm going to call get required service application. It might not do that for you. I've typed this a few times on this machine, and the Visual Studio is very clever at learning things. So what have I done here? I've said go to the dependency injection container and say, yes, I want this service. And when I say get required service, this is similar to get service, but if it can't get the service, it'll throw an exception for you. So that's the sense of get required service. We're going to fail if it doesn't happen. And the next line here would, oh, and look, it's already figured out that maybe I've typed this a couple of times before, so it saves me some typing. I'm actually going to call the method on the item, on the instantiated object. Now, if you go to the internet and you look up get required service, you'll see an awful lot of chatter about how this method, the use of this method per se is an anti-pattern, which of course is nonsense. Otherwise, I suppose Microsoft wouldn't bother putting it in the framework, would they? There's a time and a place to use it. When it's probably a bad idea to use it is in the classes of your application. So all of those classes that you're going to bring to life with dependency injection, the whole idea is that the dependencies are explicitly stated and obvious from outside. So when we do constructor injection, you can immediately look at a class and you can say, these are the things that I need to have injected from outside. If I call this method from inside a class, and there are occasions when you would want to, but few and far between, the idea then, of course, is that you're reaching into the container without it being obvious what you're doing. So for yourself or another programmer trying to maintain the code, it's less obvious what's going on. And the question then is, well, how do I know what I need to add to my container to start with? How do I know that this is correct? In this case, well, it's fairly obvious because the line that uses it is immediately below. But once you get into your application, you should have avoided the service locator pattern as such, but calling get required service here is not actually using the service locator pattern. So I would argue it anyway, and not an anti-pattern. This is fine. If you really want to avoid this, then you can do add hosted service instead of add singleton, but then your application class would have to also have some extra code added to support that. And if you're thinking, well, I'm going to start using my code elsewhere, maybe that's not what you want. This is enough for now, and it should work. And I'm actually gonna hit go, and we should see both hello world lines. Hello world. Oh, and something went wrong. Oh, I know what went wrong. Because what I've done here is I've registered iApplication, and I've accepted the automatically typed code from Visual Studio, and it's asking for the thing that I didn't register. And there you have it. That works just lovely. I think I'll leave that in. Nothing like a good mistake. Okay. So we have now a working application, but it doesn't do much. So the purpose behind wanting to get the application class from dependency injection, of course, is that when the dependency injection framework instantiates a class for you, it's then automatically doing a quick survey of the required dependencies and arranging for those too. So that's why we want to ask the container for the application instead of just instantiating it ourselves. Then we get the added services of the DI framework fixing up the rest of the dependencies. So how can we show that? Well, if I go back to create default builder, what it's telling us here is that the create default builder also configures the iLogger factory. So what this means is that if I go to my application and I say, let's make a constructor, and I say my class needs an iLogger of application, then the dependency injection container created by the default host builder is already rigged to be able to provide this. So let's just say logger equals logger, and add a read-only field, and we can maybe make that a tiny bit tidier by saying just make a lambda of it. Okay. Right. So now I have a field in my class underscore logger, which has been dependency injected. So I can say underscore logger dot log information. Let's have a nice message coming out here. Logging from the application class. And anything hello world, you should have an exclamation mark. And so I'm going to run this now, and you'll see that we get 3 lines of output, or in fact 4. And there you have it. So we're going hello world, info logging, hello world from the application class, and there we are. And you can also see down here in the output from the debug output that the information logging has also gone to there. So that's enough to demonstrate that the framework's able to inject other things into my class here. Obviously I could create more classes, register them, and also declare those as dependencies here, as you would with any application of this kind. So that was the demonstration. I hope you agree this is actually fairly painless to do, and perhaps you'll agree that it's useful in that it helps us to walk along the road of writing our code in the way we mean to go on, and making it easier to transport the code into other contexts if we later feel like that. And of course I might want to write some unit tests in my console application, so this would also support that. I'm Dominic Cronin. And that was the demonstration of adding dependency injection to a console application in Visual Studio with C#. Thanks for watching. Bye.